Captain Jake Morrison had been flying through space for 15 years. He had seen many strange planets and met different aliens, but nothing had prepared him for what he found on the crystal moon called Xerion Prime. Jake's ship, the Wanderer, needed fuel. The moon had good mining spots where he could dig for the special crystals his ship needed. He put on his spacesuit and took his tools. The moon was quiet and cold. Strange blue crystals grew everywhere like frozen trees. He walked into a large cave system. His helmet light showed the way through the dark tunnels. The crystals on the walls made pretty colors when his light hit them. Jake had been in many caves before, but this one felt different. It felt sad. Deep in the cave, Jake heard a small sound. It was like crying, but not from any animal he knew. He followed the sound through narrow passages. The crying got louder as he went deeper. In a small cave room, Jake saw something that made him stop breathing. A tiny dragon lay on the cold rock floor. It was no bigger than a house cat. Its scales were deep green like emeralds. Even in the dim light, they seemed to shine with their own glow. The baby dragon was hurt. Jake could see cuts on its small body. Its wings were torn and bleeding. The little creature looked up at Jake with big golden eyes full of pain and fear. It tried to crawl away but was too weak to move far. Jake had never seen a real dragon before. He knew they existed somewhere in the galaxy, but they kept to themselves. Dragons were proud and powerful. They ruled whole star systems. So why was this baby alone in a cold cave? The dragon tried to make fire like adult dragons do. But instead of flames, small blue sparks came from its mouth. The sparks danced in the air like tiny lightning bolts. Jake watched in wonder as the sparks made his metal tools buzz and his helmet radio make strange noises. Jake knelt down slowly. He did not want to scare the baby dragon more. "Hey there, little guy," he said softly. "I won't hurt you." The dragon's eyes stayed on Jake. It stopped trying to crawl away. Jake could see it was very thin. When had it last eaten? How long had it been alone in this cave? Jake reached into his pack and took out some food. It was just human food, but maybe the dragon was hungry enough to try it. He placed a piece of dried meat near the dragon and stepped back. The baby dragon sniffed the food. It looked at Jake, then back at the food. Finally, it took a small bite, then another. Soon it was eating like it had not had food in days. While the dragon ate, Jake looked around the cave. He found strange marks on the walls. They looked like dragon writing, but he could not read them. Near the marks, he found broken eggshells. This must be where the dragon was born. But where was its family? Dragon families were known to be very close. They protected their young with their lives. Why would they leave a baby alone? Jake looked at the little dragon again. It had finished eating and was watching him. The blue spark still came from its mouth sometimes. Maybe that was the answer. Maybe this dragon was different from other dragons. Maybe its family did not want a dragon that made sparks instead of fire. The thought made Jake angry. How could anyone leave such a small, helpless creature to die? It did not matter if the dragon was different. It was still just a baby that needed care and love. Jake made a decision that would change his life forever. He could not leave the baby dragon in this cold cave to die. He would take it with him on his ship. He had no idea how to care for a dragon, but he would learn. Very slowly, Jake picked up the tiny dragon. It was lighter than he expected. The dragon did not fight him. It seemed to understand that Jake wanted to help. The blue sparks tickled Jake's gloves but did not hurt. As Jake carried the dragon out of the cave, he thought about what to call it. The little creature looked up at him with trust in its golden eyes. "I'll call you Zeph," Jake said. "Like the wind, because you're going to fly free someday." Back on his ship, Jake made a soft bed for Zeph in his cabin. The dragon curled up and fell asleep right away. It must have been so tired and scared for so long. Jake sat and watched Zeph sleep. The dragon's breathing was soft and peaceful. Sometimes blue sparks would flicker around its nose even while sleeping. Jake smiled. He had no idea what adventures waited for them, but he knew one thing for sure. Zeph would never be alone and unwanted again. Outside the ship's windows, the crystal moon sparkled in the starlight. Jake had come here looking for fuel for his ship. Instead, he had found something much more valuable. He had found a friend who would need him, and maybe he would need Zeph too. The next morning, Jake would start the long journey of learning how to care for a baby dragon. But for now, he was happy just to watch Zeph sleep safely and know that he had done the right thing. Taking care of a baby dragon was much harder than Jake had thought. Zeph would not eat normal food for very long. After a few days of eating Jake's dried meat, the little dragon became sick and weak. Jake worried that Zeph might die if he could not find the right food. Jake spent hours reading everything he could find about dragons on his ship's computer. Most of the information was old stories and myths, but he found one scientific paper that mentioned dragons needing rare metals in their diet. Young dragons especially needed iron, copper, and something called trilithium. The problem was that trilithium only grew on certain asteroids. Jake would have to change his flight path and search for the right kind of space rocks. This would take weeks and use up most of his fuel. But when he looked at Zeph getting weaker each day, Jake knew he had no choice. Finding the right asteroids took 12 days. Jake's ship flew through 3 different asteroid fields before his scanners found rocks with the metals Zeph needed. Jake put on his spacesuit and went outside to mine the metals himself. It was dangerous work in the floating rocks, but Jake was careful. When Jake brought the metals back to the ship, he was not sure how to prepare them for Zeph. He tried grinding them into powder and mixing them with water. Zeph sniffed the mixture and turned away. Jake tried heating the metals until they melted. Zeph was not interested in that either. Finally, Jake had an idea. He remembered that the blue sparks from Zeph's mouth made his metal tools buzz. Maybe Zeph could charge the metals with his sparks before eating them. Jake held out a small piece of trilithium and encouraged Zeph to spark it. The blue electricity danced over the metal. The trilithium began to glow softly. Zeph's eyes got bright and he ate the charged metal right away. Jake smiled. They had figured it out together. As the days passed, Zeph grew stronger and bigger, but this created new problems for Jake. Zeph's blue sparks were getting stronger too. Sometimes when the dragon got excited or scared, the sparks would make all the lights on the ship flicker. The navigation computer would show wrong directions. The radio would make loud static noises. One day, Zeph had a bad dream and woke up scared. His sparks filled the whole cabin with blue light. Every electronic device on the ship went crazy. The engine shut down and Jake found himself drifting in space with no power. It took him 6 hours to restart all the systems by hand. Jake realized he needed to help Zeph control his electric powers. But how do you teach a dragon to control something that came naturally to him? Jake tried talking to Zeph, using simple words and hand gestures. Slowly, Zeph began to understand some human words. The breakthrough came when Jake discovered they could share feelings and simple thoughts. It happened by accident during another electrical storm from Zeph. Jake was frustrated and worried, and suddenly he felt that Zeph was frustrated and worried too, not just seeing it but actually feeling the same emotions. This mental connection grew stronger each day. Soon Jake could sense when Zeph was getting upset before the sparks started. He could calm the dragon down with peaceful thoughts. Zeph began to understand that his sparks caused problems for Jake and he tried harder to control them. Jake also learned that Zeph was much smarter than he had first thought. The dragon watched everything Jake did with great interest. Zeph learned to recognize different buttons and switches on the ship. He understood that some things were important for flying safely through space. One day, space pirates attacked Jake's ship. 3 fast fighters came out of nowhere and demanded that Jake give them his cargo. Jake was a good pilot, but his old ship was no match for 3 newer, faster ships. The pirates' weapons began hitting his shields. Zeph sensed Jake's fear and danger. Without being asked, the dragon moved to the front of the cabin and faced the direction of the attacking ships. Blue sparks began building around Zeph's body, but these were different from before. They were controlled and purposeful. Suddenly, a wave of blue energy burst out from Zeph and spread in all directions. The pirate ship's weapons stopped working. Their engines died. Their communication systems went silent. The 3 ships drifted helplessly in space while Jake flew away to safety. Jake stared at Zeph in amazement. The dragon had somehow sent out an electromagnetic pulse that disabled the pirate ships without hurting the people inside. It was like Zeph had created an invisible shield around Jake's ship. From that day on, Jake began to see Zeph's powers in a new way. The blue sparks were not just random electricity. They were complex energy patterns that could do amazing things. Zeph could charge metals to make them glow. He could disable dangerous machines. He could even help power Jake's ship when the engines needed extra energy. Jake started keeping detailed notes about everything Zeph could do. He recorded the different types of sparks and what each one seemed to accomplish. He measured the electromagnetic fields around Zeph when the dragon was using his powers. Jake began to suspect that these abilities were not a mistake or flaw. They might be something wonderful that other dragons did not understand. Late at night, when Zeph slept curled up next to Jake's chair, Jake would think about the dragon's original family. They had thrown away something precious because it was different from what they expected. Their loss was Jake's gain. Zeph had become more than just a companion. He had become the most important thing in Jake's life. Jake had spent 15 years flying through space alone. Now he could not imagine traveling without Zeph beside him. The dragon had brought purpose and joy to Jake's life. In return, Jake had given Zeph the love and acceptance his own family had denied him. Together, they were stronger than either could be alone. Jake provided the knowledge and experience of exploring space. Zeph provided abilities that no human technology could match. They were becoming a perfect team, though neither of them knew how important that partnership would soon become. Jake and Zeph had been traveling together for 6 months when the first emergency messages started coming through the radio. Jake was teaching Zeph how to help navigate through an asteroid field when the ship's communication system began receiving distress calls from all over human space. The first message came from a mining colony called New Haven. The voice was full of panic and fear. "This is New Haven Colony calling for help. Our power systems are failing. All our machines have stopped working. We don't know what's happening. Please, if anyone can hear this, we need immediate assistance." More messages followed quickly. A transport ship carrying families to a new world reported that their engines had died in the middle of space. A research station near Jupiter said all their computers had gone dark at the same time. Military bases called for backup as their weapons and shields stopped functioning. Jake listened to the messages with growing worry. These were not normal equipment failures. Something was affecting human technology across the entire galaxy. Zeph sensed Jake's concern and moved closer to him, blue sparks flickering softly around his scales. The messages kept coming for 3 days. Each one told the same story. Human machines and computers were shutting down everywhere. Ships were losing power and drifting helplessly. Planets were going dark as their power grids failed. Millions of people were trapped without the technology they needed to survive in space. Then came the message that changed everything. It was from Admiral Kate Rogers of the Earth Defense Fleet. Her voice was calm but serious. "This is Admiral Rogers broadcasting on all emergency channels. We have identified the cause of the technological failures. An unknown enemy has entered our space. We are calling this threat the Void Collective." Jake turned up the volume and listened carefully. Admiral Rogers continued, "The Void Collective appears to be made of pure energy. They feed on electromagnetic radiation and can drain power from any human technology. Our weapons cannot harm them because they absorb the energy from our attacks and become stronger." The Admiral's voice became more urgent. "All civilian ships are ordered to stay away from the outer colonies. The enemy is moving toward the core worlds. We are preparing for a final defense at Earth, but our chances are not good. We need a miracle." Jake felt cold fear in his stomach. He had heard stories about ancient enemies that had once threatened all life in the galaxy, but those were supposed to be myths. Now it seemed like one of those old nightmares had come back to life. Zeph made a soft sound and pressed against Jake's arm. The dragon seemed to understand that something terrible was happening. His blue sparks were acting strangely, forming patterns that Jake had never seen before. The patterns looked almost like writing, but Jake could not read them. Over the next few days, Jake and Zeph watched helplessly as the situation got worse. The Void Collective moved through human space like a dark storm. Every planet they touched went silent. Every ship they encountered was drained of power and left dead in space. Jake received one last message from his friend Lisa Carter, who worked on a research station near Mars. "Jake, if you get this message, stay away from the inner system. These things are not like anything we've ever seen. They look like shadows made of starlight. When they touch our ships, all the power just flows out like water through a broken dam." Lisa's voice was shaking with fear. "They're not trying to talk to us or make demands. They just take our energy and move on. It's like we're not even people to them, just batteries to be drained. The fleet is falling back to Earth, but I don't think we can stop them. Jake, I'm scared. I don't know if humanity will survive this. The message ended in static. Jake tried to call Lisa back but got no answer. He feared the worst. Jake wanted to help, but what could one man and a baby dragon do against an enemy that had defeated entire fleets? His ship was small and old. He had no weapons that could fight beings made of pure energy. He felt useless while his own species faced extinction, but Zeph was acting more strangely each day. The dragon seemed to sense something that Jake could not detect. Zeph would face toward the direction of Earth and make soft growling sounds. His blue sparks came more often and formed more complex patterns. One night while Jake was sleeping, Zeph's sparks woke him up. The entire cabin was filled with blue light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Jake had never seen Zeph's powers so active while the dragon was sleeping. It was like Zeph was responding to something in his dreams. Jake checked his instruments and found something amazing. Zeph's electromagnetic field was reaching far beyond the ship. It was spreading out into space like invisible radar, searching for something. When Jake looked at the readings more carefully, he realized that Zeph was detecting energy signatures that human instruments could not find. The patterns in Zeph's sparks were not random. They matched the frequency readings that Jake's instruments were picking up from deep space. Somehow Zeph was sensing the Void Collective from thousands of miles away. The dragon knew where they were and what they were doing. Jake began to understand that Zeph's connection to electromagnetic energy was deeper than he had thought. The dragon was not just making pretty sparks. He was reading the electromagnetic spectrum like humans read books. Zeph could sense forms of energy that human science had never discovered. As Jake watched the news reports about the Void Collective destroying more human colonies, he began to wonder if Zeph's strange powers might be more important than anyone realized. The dragon had been rejected by his family for being different. But maybe being different was exactly what humanity needed right now. Jake made a decision that scared him. Instead of running away from the danger like every smart person would do, he was going to fly toward Earth. He did not know if Zeph could help in the fight against the Void Collective, but he had to try. Humanity had accepted Zeph when his own family would not. Now maybe Zeph could return that kindness by helping to save the species that had given him a home. Jake set course for Earth, knowing that he might be flying toward his death. But as he looked at Zeph, whose blue sparks danced with new purpose and determination, Jake felt a small spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could make a difference. As Jake's ship got closer to Earth, Zeph became more restless than ever before. The dragon had grown to the size of a large dog over the past months, and his blue sparks were now strong enough to light up the entire ship. But these were not the uncontrolled bursts of electricity from his early days. These sparks moved with purpose and intelligence. Jake watched in amazement as Zeph created complex patterns in the air with his sparks. The patterns looked like star maps, showing the positions of planets and ships. Some areas pulsed with dark energy that made Jake feel cold just looking at them. Those had to be the locations of the Void Collective. When they reached the outer edge of Earth's solar system, Jake saw the remains of humanity's last hope. Hundreds of dead ships floated in space like a graveyard. These had been the most powerful warships in the human fleet, but now they were just empty metal shells drained of all power and life. Jake's radio crackled with weak signals from the few ships still fighting near Earth. Admiral Rogers's voice came through, tired and desperate. "This is Earth Defense Command. We have lost 70% of our fleet. The enemy has reached Mars orbit. All remaining ships fall back to Earth's moon. We make our final stand there." Jake felt sick as he listened to the reports. The Void Collective was not just winning the war. They were destroying humanity so easily that it was barely a fight. Human weapons could not hurt beings made of pure energy. Every shot fired at them just made them stronger. But as Jake piloted his ship through the wreckage of the human fleet, something incredible happened. Zeph suddenly stood up and faced toward Earth. His sparks exploded outward in a brilliant blue wave that spread in all directions. For a moment, every dead ship around them flickered back to life. Emergency lights turned on in the dark ships. Communication systems started working again for a few seconds. Jake heard voices calling out in surprise and hope before the power faded again. But those few seconds proved something important. Zeph could give power back to machines that the Void Collective had drained. Jake opened a communication channel to Earth Defense Command. This is Captain Jake Morrison in the ship Wanderer. I have something that might help in the fight against the Void Collective. Admiral Rogers herself answered. Morrison, unless you have a weapon that can hurt energy beings, we don't have time for this. The enemy will reach Earth in 6 hours. Admiral, I have a dragon with me. He can restore power to ships that have been drained by the enemy. I think his abilities might be exactly what we need to fight these things. There was a long silence. Then Admiral Rogers spoke again, her voice filled with disbelief. Did you say a dragon? Morrison, are you losing your mind? This is not the time for fairy tales. Jake looked at Zeph, who was watching him with intelligent golden eyes. Admiral, I know how it sounds, but this dragon has electromagnetic abilities unlike anything human science has ever seen. He can detect the Void Collective from far away and restore power to dead machines. Please, just give us a chance. Another voice came on the radio. It was Dr. Helen Price, the fleet's chief scientist. Admiral, we've lost everything else. If this man really has a creature that can affect electromagnetic energy, we should at least look at it. What do we have to lose? Admiral Rogers made a quick decision. Morrison, report to the command ship Washington immediately. But if this is some kind of joke, I'll have you thrown in the brig. Jake flew his ship to the massive command vessel that served as headquarters for the human fleet. As he docked, he could see that even this powerful ship was running on emergency power. Most of its weapons and shields were offline, drained by previous encounters with the Void Collective. When Jake walked into the command center with Zeph beside him, every person in the room stopped talking and stared. They had all heard stories about dragons, but none of them had ever seen one in real life. Zeph was beautiful and frightening at the same time, with his emerald scales gleaming under the ship's lights and blue sparks dancing around his body. Admiral Rogers was a tall woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. She looked at Zeph with a mixture of wonder and skepticism. So this is your dragon. What exactly can it do? Before Jake could answer, alarms began ringing throughout the ship. A young officer at a control station called out, Admiral, the Void Collective has detected our position. 3 of them are heading straight for us. Through the command center's windows, Jake could see dark shapes moving through space toward their ship. The void beings looked like shadows cut out of the starlight itself. They moved without ships or engines, flowing through space like living darkness. All ships prepare for battle, Admiral Rogers ordered. This is our last chance. The human ships opened fire with everything they had left. Laser beams and missile strikes lit up space like fireworks. But as soon as the weapons hit the void beings, the energy was absorbed into their dark forms. The enemy grew brighter and larger, feeding on the attack. Zeph suddenly roared, a sound unlike anything Jake had ever heard from him before. The dragon's blue sparks exploded outward, filling the entire command center with electromagnetic energy. Every screen and instrument in the room began showing new information. Dr. Price gasped as she looked at her readings. These energy patterns are incredible. The dragon is generating frequencies that I've never seen before. It's like he's speaking in a language made of electricity. One of the void beings reached the Washington and began draining its power. The lights dimmed and weapon systems shut down one by one. Jake felt the familiar cold that came from being near these energy vampires. But Zeph was ready for them. The dragon moved to the center of the command center and released a focused burst of blue energy. This was different from his previous sparks. This energy moved in complex waves that pushed against the void being's attempt to drain the ship. For the first time since the war began, a human ship kept its power while under direct attack from the Void Collective. The Washington's weapons came back online. Its shields strengthened. The crew cheered as they realized they could fight back. Target the void being while the dragon is protecting us, Admiral Rogers ordered. The Washington's main guns fired at the enemy, but instead of feeding on the energy, the void being seemed to be hurt by it. The creature flickered and pulled back from the ship, clearly confused by what was happening. Dr. Price was studying her instruments with excitement. Admiral, the dragon's electromagnetic field is interfering with the void being's ability to absorb energy. It's like he's jamming their feeding mechanism. Jake felt a surge of pride as he watched Zeph in action. The little dragon that had been rejected by his own family was proving to be humanity's salvation. His family cast him out because his powers were different from traditional dragon fire. But those powers are exactly what we need to fight the Void Collective. Zeph looked at Jake and sent him a feeling of determination through their mental link. The dragon understood what was at stake. He was ready to fight to protect the humans who had given him love and acceptance when his own kind would not. Admiral Rogers turned to Jake with new respect in her eyes. "Morrison, can your dragon protect our entire fleet?" Jake looked at Zeph, who was already growing brighter with blue energy. "I think we're about to find out, Admiral. Zeph has been getting stronger every day, and I have a feeling he's not done surprising us yet." The final battle for Earth began when the main force of the Void Collective arrived. Hundreds of the dark energy beings surrounded the remaining human fleet near Earth's moon. From the command center of the Washington, Jake watched in terror as more enemies appeared than anyone had expected. Admiral Rogers gave orders to all ships to form a defensive circle around Earth. "This is it, people. We make our stand here. If we fail, humanity dies with us." Zeph had grown larger during the journey to Earth. He was now the size of a small spacecraft, his emerald scales gleaming with inner light. The dragon moved to the front of the command center and spread his wings wide. Blue electricity danced along every scale on his body. "Can he really protect all our ships?" Dr. Price asked, checking her instruments. "There are over 50 vessels in our fleet, and hundreds of enemy beings out there." Jake put his hand on Zeph's neck, feeling the warm scales and the electric energy flowing beneath them. "We're about to find out how powerful he really is." The Void Collective attacked all at once. Dark waves of energy reached out from hundreds of beings, trying to drain every human ship at the same time. The fleet's power began failing as lights dimmed and engines shut down across dozens of vessels. Zeph roared again, but this time his voice carried across space itself. The dragon's blue energy exploded outward like a star being born. Electromagnetic waves spread from ship to ship, creating a network of protection that covered the entire human fleet. Something amazing happened. Ships that had lost power suddenly came back to life. Weapons that had been drained began working again. Communication systems that had been silent started receiving signals. For the first time in weeks, the human fleet was fighting at full strength. "All ships open fire," Admiral Rogers commanded. The combined firepower of 50 human warships lit up space. But instead of the energy being absorbed by the Void Collective, the attacks actually hurt the enemy beings. Protected by Zeph's electromagnetic field, the human weapons worked like they were supposed to. Several void beings flickered and grew dimmer as the attacks hit them. The enemy pulled back in confusion. They had never encountered anything that could stop their ability to feed on electromagnetic energy. But the battle was far from over. The Void Collective had been fighting for thousands of years. They quickly adapted their tactics, spreading out to attack from all directions at once. Some of them tried to get behind Zeph's protective field by moving very fast around the edges of the fleet. Zeph sensed the danger. The dragon's sparks began forming more complex patterns than Jake had ever seen. It was like watching someone write poetry with lightning. The patterns spread out from Zeph and surrounded each human ship with its own personal shield. Dr. Price was amazed by what her instruments were showing her. The dragon is creating individual electromagnetic signatures for every ship in the fleet. Each one is tuned to protect against the specific energy patterns the void beings use. Jake felt proud of his friend, but he could also sense that Zeph was getting tired. Protecting so many ships at once was taking all of the dragon's strength. Blue sparks were flying everywhere, and Zeph's breathing was becoming heavy. "He can't keep this up forever," Jake told Admiral Rogers. "We need to end this battle quickly." The Admiral nodded and opened communications to all ships. "All vessels concentrate fire on the largest enemy beings. We need to break their formation while the dragon can still protect us." The human fleet focused their attacks on the biggest void beings. These were the leaders of the collective, ancient creatures that had absorbed energy from countless civilizations. Under normal circumstances, they would have been impossible to hurt. But with Zeph's protection, human weapons were finally effective. One by one, the largest void beings began to flicker and fade. But as they grew weaker, something unexpected happened. Instead of disappearing, they began to change. The dark energy that made up their bodies started to shift and transform. Zeph suddenly stopped fighting and tilted his head to listen to something that only he could hear. His blue sparks changed into new patterns that looked almost like music made visible. Jake realized that Zeph was not just jamming the void being's ability to feed. He was trying to communicate with them. "What's happening?" Admiral Rogers asked. Jake listened through his mental link with Zeph and felt a flood of new understanding. "They're not evil," he said in amazement. "The Void Collective isn't trying to destroy us out of hatred. They're starving, their home dimension is dying, and they need electromagnetic energy to survive." Through Zeph's sparks, the void beings were finally able to communicate with organic life forms. Their message was one of desperate hunger and loneliness. They had been feeding on civilizations for thousands of years, but they had never been able to explain why. Dr. Price was recording everything on her instruments. "The dragon is creating a translation system using electromagnetic frequencies. He's making it possible for us to understand each other." Jake felt Zeph's thoughts flowing through their connection. The dragon was showing the void being something they had never considered before. Instead of taking energy by force, they could receive it as a gift. Humans had technology that could generate the type of energy the Void Collective needed, and they could share it willingly. Admiral Rogers was skeptical. "You're saying these things that have been destroying our colonies just need food? And we're supposed to trust them?" But Zeph's communication was having an effect. The void beings stopped attacking and began to gather in a circle around the human fleet. Their dark energy forms started to pulse with patterns that matched Zeph's sparks. They were learning to speak in the language that the dragon had created. The largest void being, ancient and powerful beyond imagination, sent a message through Zeph's translation system. "We have been alone for so long that we forgot other minds existed. We took what we needed because we did not know how to ask. The small bright one has shown us a new way." Jake felt tears in his eyes as he understood what was happening. Zeph had not just saved humanity from the Void Collective. He had saved the Void Collective from themselves. They had been so hungry and desperate that they had forgotten how to be anything other than predators. Dr. Price was already working on solutions. "We can modify our power generators to produce energy in the frequency ranges they need. It won't cost us anything, and it will give them a sustainable food source." Admiral Rogers looked around at her crew, then at Jake and Zeph. The dragon was tired but happy, his blue sparks dancing peacefully around his scales. "I guess we're about to make the strangest peace treaty in human history." The war ended not with victory or defeat, but with understanding. Humanity agreed to provide the Void Collective with the energy they needed to survive. In return, the Void beings shared their ancient knowledge of energy manipulation and space travel. Zeph became the bridge between three different forms of life. Dragons, humans, and energy beings all learned from each other. The galaxy became a safer and more wonderful place because a rejected baby dragon had taught everyone that being different was not a weakness, but a strength. Years later, when Jake was old and Zeph had grown into a magnificent adult dragon, they would still travel through space together. But now they were not alone. Ships from all three civilizations worked together to explore new worlds and help other species in need. And sometimes, when Jake looked at Zeph flying freely through the stars with blue sparks trailing behind him like cosmic fireworks, he would remember that cold cave on a crystal moon where it all began. A baby dragon that nobody wanted had become the savior of three entire civilizations. Zeph had finally found where he belonged, not with the family that had rejected him, but with the family he had chosen and who had chosen him in return.